Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you all are having a great time. We're going to get started here very shortly, but the state of California requires me to make this announcement. Emergency exits are located towards the back of the auditorium with one additional exit in front to your left. In the event of an emergency evacuation, please exit from the nearest safe exit and head towards the back of GSB. Restrooms are located outside to the left. Thanks, and y'all have a nice day.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program is about to begin.
Since I was born, I wanted to do something meaningful and not waste my time on this planet.
You feel every emotion all at one time.
I think it's the greatest challenge you'll ever face in life.
You try it, and then you cannot stop.
The joy that comes from seeing something that you thought about, and then now you see it starting to take off. There is nothing that can parallel it.
It's really almost like a very primal thing. We've been doing it since the beginning of time.
There's no roadmap. You're kind of figuring it out. Sometimes it can be terrifying.
that can solve a lot of the problems that plague the world.
From my point of view, the experience is I couldn't live without it.
When you're about to die, the only thing you regret is the thing you have not done.
Entrepreneurs start small and they aim high. And of course, most of them fail on their way. But once they achieve the goal, they change the world.
I like being an entrepreneur. I wouldn't have it any other way. I really wouldn't.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Director of Google for Entrepreneurs, Mary Grove.
Good afternoon. How is everybody? Great. My name is Mary Grove. I'm the Director of Google for Entrepreneurs, and it is a tremendous honor to be here at GES. We have a two-part program for you today. So for the first half, I'm going to talk about some trends in entrepreneurship that we believe are changing the world. And for the second half, I will invite one of the most inspirational entrepreneurs I know, the president of Alphabet and co-founder of Google, Sergey Brin. So let's get started. So Google for Entrepreneurs supports startup communities around the world and connects entrepreneurs to resources and each other so that together we can work on the world's biggest challenges. Now, Google began as a startup in a garage about 20 years ago, and actually before that, we originally got started right here at Stanford University. So we are a company founded by entrepreneurs, built by entrepreneurial people, and we are passionate about empowering the next generation of startups to be successful. We believe that helping entrepreneurs succeed means investing and building resources in the communities where they live and work, not just here in Silicon Valley, but all over the world. We partner with over 50 organizations across 6 continents, all of whom are dedicated to helping entrepreneurs succeed. And we aim to address the full spectrum of the life cycle of an entrepreneur. So when you're at the aspirational or inspirational stage, groups like Startup Grind, who are helping build a community. When you are at the stage where you're building a product, you need acceleration and education, we work with groups like Techstars and Galvanize. When you're a little bit later stage and you need access to capital and global connections, we work with groups like Startup Angels and Astia Angels. Now, over the past decade, I have traveled to communities ranging as far from Gaza and Palestine to Herat, Afghanistan, to New Delhi, India, to Nashville, Tennessee, from Seoul, South Korea, to Baghdad, Iraq, and more. And I've seen something firsthand that we all in this room know to be true, that entrepreneurship is alive and well and thriving all over the world, but it doesn't always take the form you might expect. So about 5 years ago, I visited Afghanistan. There's very limited internet penetration in Afghanistan. So I was surprised to find that people I met everywhere there had such a deep enthusiasm for Google and for Google search. So I had to ask, how is it that you interact with Google search? So I found out that radio is the ubiquitous form of communication in Afghanistan. Most people have access to radio. And so there is a radio show called Persipal, which means seek and search. So people call into this radio show from their traditional mobile phones. The DJ has access to the internet, so people ask a query. The DJ does a search on Google and reads the answer over the air. Really, really amazing. And to me, this underscores this notion that constraint breeds creativity, right? Entrepreneurs are ever innovative in finding ways to access information. On that same trip in Herat, Afghanistan, I met a young woman named Roya Mahbub, and she's pictured here in the center of the photo. So Roya was in her early 20s, and she ran a software company called Afghan Citadel Software. She employed a large number of women alongside men. And Roya had been doing transformative work to educate women and girls in her country. In 2013, Roya was named one of Time magazine's most influential people in the world. And she returned home after a brief media tour around the world, and it was surprising that she was met not just with praise, but with threats, criticism, and tremendous opposition. It was a difficult time for Roya, but she persevered, and she expanded her program, which now aims to educate and train 5,000 young women in Afghanistan on how to become entrepreneurs. Roya lives in New York City, and she runs an organization called the Digital Citizen Fund to take this mission global. And to me, this demonstrates the power of entrepreneurship. It is about freedom, it's about development, it is about creating a better future despite overwhelmingly difficult odds. And it is inspirational entrepreneurs like Roya who are changing the world. So I'd like to talk today about 4 trends that we've seen in our work and we believe affect entrepreneurs around the world. The first trend is that the tipping point is here. By the year 2020, we know that 90% of people over the age of 6 will have a mobile phone or have direct access to one. Now, embedded in this are 2 key facts. One is that our world is more connected than ever, and 2 is that the world's population is actually getting younger. More people, for example, in Korea have smartphones than desktops, so 84% versus 78%. We know that more than 50% of people in the world are under age 30. And a staggering 89.7% of people under the age of 30 live in emerging markets, particularly in the Middle East and Africa. If we look at India specifically, we know that 65% of India's population is under the age of 35, and 50% of that population is under age 25. So if you look at the landscape of the world, we know that the population is shifting. What we're seeing as part of this trend is startups capitalizing on this new landscape. Take, for example, Kano, a startup whose mission is to empower a new generation to make and play with technology, not just to consume it. So Kano creates computer and coding kits for kids of all ages all over the world. They were inspired by a challenge from a 6-year-old to build a computer kit as simple and fun to use as Legos are. So they launched on Kickstarter in 2013. They became one of the most successful campaigns on the platform, and they recently went on to raise a Series A round of funding and have users all over the world. What this also means is that startups have access to global markets from day one. You no longer are constrained to thinking about just building for users in your city or even in your country. Take, for example, Sendbird, a startup founded by John Kim, one of our mentors at Campus Seoul. Sendbird is a chat API for mobile apps and websites. Sendbird helps developers build one-on-one messaging and group chatting functionality within 5 minutes. Their customers range from live video streaming, e-commerce, gaming, and consumer apps. Now, Sendbird started out as a tech company who addressed the global market from the get-go, from day one. They started in Seoul, South Korea, but they also incorporated in the US in order to gain better access to customers, global talent, and capital. Since graduating from Y Combinator earlier this year, Sendbird has gone on to raise seed funding from investors in the US, in Europe, and Asia. And they also have users across all of those markets. So you're seeing that the opportunity is to think about going global from day one, not just building for your market, thinking about the next wave of users coming online, and also thinking about that growing youth population. And my point is that this is not a bubble, and we are just getting started. The second trend is that a new economy of creators has emerged. New forms of educational content are making it easier to access new forms of education more quickly than ever before. Take, for example, platforms like Udacity, Galvanize, the Coalition for Queens. These platforms allow you to learn the skills yourself, whether that's completely online, completely offline in the classroom, or a combination of both. Of course, platforms like YouTube that enable you to be the creator and have access to a global audience from day one. Platforms like 500 Startups, who provide high-quality educational content to help you refine your skills and scale and go global. What does this mean in practice? One of the organizations we partner with is called the Coalition for Queens, and they run a mobile boot camp on both iOS and Android, and they train developers over the course of a 6-month intensive program. The results have been amazing. They've run 3 cohorts, and we have seen that the average salary of graduates has gone from $18,000 a year to $85,000 a year after the program. What I think is amazing is that historically, these types of programs were born in Silicon Valley, right? You had to have access to the classroom, you had to be here. But they have all gone global, meaning that we all have access, no matter where we are. So my advice to the entrepreneurs in the room is to start from anywhere and make it global. And I really believe that you don't need to move to Silicon Valley to be successful. The third trend is that companies building with diverse teams and for diverse audiences produce better outcomes. One of our goals at Google for Entrepreneurs is to help build inclusive communities. Now, what do we mean by this? Well, it means different things in different parts of the world. It could be race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. And for us, it means working hard to invite underrepresented minority groups into existing networks, not create separate networks for them and create reinforcing existing silos. At Google for Entrepreneurs, we have a 2-pronged approach to this work. On the one hand, we back organizations who are directly focused on serving underrepresented minority entrepreneurs and bringing them into the community. The second approach is to work across this amazing global network of partners we have to help them tackle diversity across the board. So let's take a look at each of these approaches. So let's zoom in to Tel Aviv, where we run a program called Applicable. Applicable is designed to help startups make their apps and products more accessible to those with visual impairments. So what we do is we bring in a number of companies and we bring in actual users with visual impairments to test and give feedback in real time. Over the last several months, we have helped dozens of startups make their apps more accessible. So one great example of this in action is a company called Move It. This is a real-time app designed to help you have a better public transit experience. So it combines transit data with live inputs from the crowd to give you the fastest, most comfortable route. And Move It is live today in over 90 cities. Recently, they went through the Applicable program at our campus in Tel Aviv. So users can now use TalkBack or VoiceOver to hear what button or icon is underneath as their finger hovers over the screen. They can plan ahead before leaving home or work, and also get notifications a few stops ahead of when they're supposed to disembark. So they found that this is actually such a huge pain point for users with visual impairments that they hadn't known about. But of course, this is a feature that any user can take advantage of. So to me, this illustrates that thinking about building for diverse communities goes well beyond just gender, just race, just socioeconomic status, but it also is a powerful way to help bring more users into your existing user base. So another great example of inclusive communities leading to better outcomes is in Palestine. I first visited Gaza in 2010, and it is a very special place. This is a photo that I took in front of a wall in Gaza that stayed with me for a long time. Let's look at the composition of Gaza, the characteristics. Geographically, it is 138 square miles, which is roughly the size of the San Francisco Bay Area Peninsula. It has a population of 1.8 million people. Astoundingly, 65% of Gazans are age 30 or younger, and there is an amazingly high literacy rate of 96%. But what we see is a lack of jobs, a lack of opportunity, particularly among university graduates. Unemployment is a staggering 70%. So you see here, we have a large youth population full of tenacity and grit, unwilling to let geography constrain their innovation. So what happens next? I'd like you to meet Dalia Sharab, who was selected to attend GES, but was unable to as her exit permit was denied. Dahlia is part of a team working on Diety, which is an app for women that supports healthy, realistic dieting and tracks fitness and exercise. So I want to share the story of Abir Al-Shair, the founder of Diety. Abir just went through an incubation program run by a partner of ours, Gaza Sky Geeks. She started the program as a college senior with an ambitious double major of computer engineering and English literature. Now, she hadn't had any exposure to the world of business or startups. In fact, she'd never even done a group project. But Abir had an idea. Abir is part of a special program at Gaza Sky Geeks to support female founders. What happens is she receives a fellowship stipend, which means that she is essentially hired to work on her startup. This addresses two problems that we see on the ground very often. Number one, she now has a job and the skills learning experience that comes with it, which is addressing the issue of unemployment. And two, she has a stipend that covers her costs, which helps families value and support these women going to work and leaving the house. In just a few months, Abir went from knowing absolutely nothing about business to being nearly ready to receive venture capital investment. She has built her app, and Gaza Sky Geeks connected her to one of the top tech companies in the region, where the vice president of product is her regular mentor. Abir says she realized she had potential and became committed to her idea when she was selected for this program. Suddenly, getting paid a salary made her understand that this was for real, that her idea had tangible value. Getting paid, selecting who to hire, distributing salaries, and launching the product has fueled her confidence and her ambition. She told us, "I used to dream of being a teacher or lecturer because that is what women in Gaza are taught to dream of. But now I realize that I was made to be a CEO, I was made to be a manager, and I'm planning to go on and get an MBA." Most of all, she says, "I no longer feel like I am part of society, I feel like I am shaping it." The lesson here is that small adaptations can affect huge change, and thinking about change within a cultural context really matters. Now, this project within Gaza Sky Geeks was part of a global campaign we ran called 40 Forward, where 40 of our partner communities came forward to launch a new program, tweak an existing program, or put out an active call to action to increase participation of women across the world, across all these efforts. In that one-year period, we are proud to say we saw a net 10% increase in participation of women across the board. The data show us that this isn't just the right thing to do, it is also good for business. A recent McKinsey report found that advancing women's equality can add $12 trillion to global growth. Now, we need the tech sector to play our part by increasing labor force participation rates, professional and technical jobs, and by fostering more leadership positions for women. My advice to entrepreneurs is to think about inclusion both within and outside your walls in how you build your team and for whom you're building products. So speaking of looking outside your walls, as somebody who lives in Silicon Valley, I have seen firsthand the world over that innovation is alive and well outside of Silicon Valley. One great example is Tatiana Bergeson, an entrepreneur from Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. Tatiana founded her startup, Mati Energy, as a student at Duke University. She began brewing gallons of tea for herself and her friends, and it's taking the energy drink market by storm as an alternative to other options. Now, we have been a proud supporter of Tatiana's journey. She started Mati in 2012, and in 2013, she moved into American Underground, a tech hub partner of ours in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. She then went on to be a mentee in the 40 Forward program, which I spoke about earlier. And she also came to Silicon Valley as part of a program called Black Box Connect, which brings founders from all over the world here for an immersive boot camp. Last year, she came to the Google headquarters to pitch at our annual Google for Entrepreneurs Demo Day, after which she closed a $1.3 million round of funding, including from an investor who couldn't make it out to Demo Day, but tuned in to watch her on the live stream. So just this year, she opened the first ever craft energy beverage manufacturing facility in the United States. And just last week, Tatiana was honored by Inc. magazine as one of the under 30 entrepreneurs to watch. Again, this underscores the point that you don't need to be based in Silicon Valley to build a thriving business, and that anyone can leverage technology and the internet to help their business succeed. The fourth trend is around physical space. Right? In our very hyper-connected online world, still nothing can replace the power of physical connections offline. So I really believe that physical space is so paramount to building startups and great startup communities. Let's look at co-working. So we know that co-working as a phenomenon is on the rise globally. According to the Global Co-working Survey run by DeskMag, 25% of co-working spaces in the US and 33% of spaces around the world are less than 1 year old. Now, 60% of these plan to expand in the next year. Community, this sense of community, remains the most important reason people cited for why they joined co-working spaces, above events at 45%, and we still all crave a good internet connection, which came in at 60%. There are over 7,000 spaces globally, and we have 37% female membership across the board. Now, it's physical spaces like these that create a home base for the startup community, a central landing place for events, for current aspiring entrepreneurs, for investors, and more. If you're still not convinced, why should I join a co-working space? So meet ITs, a successful startup based in London. They are one of the largest deployments of digital taxi top advertising across Europe. Richard Corbett and his team moved into our campus London right when we opened. Over the next 3 years, ITs grew their revenue by 100x without having to scale their costs and their overhead. And they had access to office hours, mentorship, investors, and more. So we see every single day the power of co-working. At Google for Entrepreneurs, we run 6 campuses around the world. In London, Tel Aviv, Seoul, Madrid, Warsaw, and just last week we launched our 6th campus and first in Latin America in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Anybody from Brazil here? All right. So we picked up some learnings along the way. We also partner with about 30 tech hubs around the world who provide best-in-class spaces. So our goal with these spaces is to literally provide physical infrastructure for startups to go global and access new markets. For example, we have something called the Google for Entrepreneurs Global Passport. So if you're an entrepreneur based at one of our 6 campuses or one of our 30 partner spaces, you can work for free from any of these spaces around the world when you're on the road. So imagine looking to enter the Asian mobile market and working for free out of Campus Seoul, looking to break into Latin America and heading to Brazil. So what we've learned is that it's actually these connections amongst the hubs, and it's actually this physical infrastructure that is the underlying support for our entrepreneurs. So my advice to entrepreneurs is to seek out and take advantage of physical spaces in your communities as a springboard to help you go global. Every day we are inspired by the brilliance and courage of entrepreneurs all around the world. In closing, I want to share a few lessons that I've learned about what I think sets exemplary entrepreneurs apart. The first is that they embrace failure. And there is this cultural value around iterating quickly, failing quickly, and moving on. The second is a mentality of paying it forward, right? That you've been helped along the way by many others, and that once I've succeeded, I will give back, whether that's through mentorship, through office hours, perhaps as an angel investor. And the third lesson is that transparency goes a long way. That's both transparency in the culture of how I run my company, but also transparency in getting feedback early and often from people about my idea and not being afraid to put it out there. So in summary, 4 trends that I believe are shaping the future. The first is that the tipping point has arrived, and we are living in not just a mobile first, but in many cases, a mobile-only world. The second is that a new creative economy has emerged, and new forms of education are empowering a new class of entrepreneurs to develop very quickly. The third is that diverse teams lead to better outcomes, and we should all do our part to make this a reality. And the fourth is that physical space is paramount to building successful startups and successful startup communities. I am constantly amazed at the power of entrepreneurship to solve major problems for the world. From Brazil to India to Palestine and beyond, I am so excited for the future of entrepreneurs around the world. Thank you. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce one of the greatest entrepreneurs I know, the president of Alphabet and the co-founder of Google, Sergey Brin. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. It's super exciting to be here. It's been really an eye-opening event for me, and I'm so excited for all the entrepreneurs that I've met here and I see here, and the spirit of optimism that I see here. It's a real pleasure.
So welcome back to Stanford. This is, of course, a very special place for you. When you were a graduate student here, you and Larry, of course, started Google here. So tell me about, what was it about the environment here at Stanford that helped you conceive of Google, and what was your original mission?
So first of all, I'll say I love being at Stanford, and I really, from the moment I first visited it, I guess 93 or so, until and to this day, I still spend a lot of time on campus here. It was I've probably been on campus independent of this event already 3 times this week. I think, setting aside the nice weather, the beautiful scenery and so forth, it's a sense of real freedom. The freedom to pursue your own thoughts, your own ideas, to explore. I think it is conveyed in the physical space where if you kind of, wander about, there are kind of vast open spaces that are yet unpopulated of large new buildings, but also just from an ideological point of view, that freedom of creativity, I feel, permeates it here.
Looking back on the early days, was there a critical moment when you knew that Google was going to take off and really be here for the duration?
Well, I still worry whether it's here for the duration. So I guess that moment has not yet come.
We certainly hope so.
But nevertheless, I think I felt we had something when we started using it ourselves. And we had the prototype before Google. We called it Backrub. I don't know if any of you were using the internet back then. But it was a very simple search engine, and yet at the time, compared to, there were probably half a dozen reasonably well-funded companies that were doing search. But nevertheless, we found ourselves using our own product because of the relevance, because of the ranking, and we didn't advertise it particularly, but increasingly, our friends around the department and broadly around the university, started to use it and play with it. It was a time of great discovery on the web as a whole. And speaking of sort of that freedom, the entrepreneurial spirit, the notion that you could just put something online, quite quickly, you could whip something up, a web server, in a matter of a couple days, and have the world come and see it and try it out. It was really refreshing. And back then, they had, believe it or not, some of you might remember this, there was a what's new list, basically. Like every month, all the new websites of that month were listed on this list. I know you think this is crazy, but every single one, like...
How many were on the list each week? Or each month?
I mean, it started getting, exponentially out of control until they stopped. But this was, NCSA Mosaic. They made the web browser at the time, and they would publish this list. And, you'd have, a dozen and then 20 per month and things like that. And it'd be like, this elementary school's fish tank is now on the web. You'd get excited because you'd never seen a fish tank on the web before. Or, Carnegie Mellon had their soda machine on the web, and it would tell you how many, cans of whatever, Tab, now I'm really dating myself, were available and whether they were cold or not. And obviously there's no reason you would care about the status of a vending machine, in Pittsburgh, but it was so exciting, and people take note and play. I think it was a great time. I think now is also a very wonderful time to be an entrepreneur, but the web specifically back then was we didn't know what it was going to become.
Early days. So one of the things, I first met you 12 years ago. When I started at Google, we were about 2,000 people, and now we're over 60,000. One of the things that I've been most amazed by is the culture of the company and the culture that you and Larry built, and Google is very well known for that. We've been on the #1 spot of the Fortune 100 best companies, I think 7 of the last 10 years. So can you talk a little bit about what culture did you aspire to create at Google? How did you do it in practice? What advice do you have for entrepreneurs in the room and how to think about culture within their startups?
Great question. I think first of all, I should back up and say we just have been lucky in a lot of ways. So, I don't think, success was guaranteed, based on X, Y, Z factor or something like that. I do think there are a few things that, I'm proud that I think we did well and correctly. But, luck is just a huge part of the equation. Nevertheless, I think all of you here have already achieved the most important thing, which is that you guys are trying to build something. It's the sort of the pursuit of happiness and the pursuit of success and the pursuit of your dream that is the most exciting and thrilling to the human spirit. And all of you, by virtue of being in this room, I can tell you're on your own treadmills and your own exciting paths. But what are the things for employees? We borrowed a lot of culture from Stanford, actually, and specifically a university culture of greater openness, the TGIFs that you're familiar with, that we did used to have them on Fridays, but anyway, they moved to Thursdays to accommodate the Asian offices and so forth. Those originated actually, Stanford Computer Science Department had those. Right. The notion that you could, freely chat with all your coworkers, understand what was going on. There are a lot of traditions that we borrowed from there. I think the other thing that worked really well for us is this, the general mission of making information available, accessible to people is an important mission. And I can't claim that originally sort of my research or Larry's research on the web and data mining, it wasn't like, oh, I want to do something great for the world and information is so important. I mean, it so happened that experimentation led us there. But then we pursued that and we saw its value and we developed that further. And I think ending up with a meaningful mission is very important to employees, sort of more so than, I know we're known for various perks and things like that, but fundamentally, I think the employees deeply believe that what we're doing is important and that it's good for the world. I think that's the key.
Very much a culture of trust and transparency, and you're well cared for. So Sergey, you've spent the last few years deeply involved in running Google X, thinking about next generation technologies like self-driving cars and Project Loon. How do you think about product development? How do you make decisions about, when something has run its course? And what within that portfolio are you most bullish about right now?
That's true. So for a few years now, I've been focused on Google X, which is sort of the the miscellaneous stuff, if you will. That's not related to our core. And to be perfectly honest, it's been quite an educational experience for me because overwhelmingly we're dealing not just with software and services, but we're actually building physical things. I guess I've learned firsthand why the more traditional businesses, if you will, that were kind of very envious of the internet businesses back when we were rising. Physical things are hard. There's just inherent costs and challenges to scaling and timelines that make things quite challenging. Nevertheless, I'm very optimistic about kind of the marriage of these more physical things in our world to technology. Technologies such as machine learning, to information technology. I think the marriage of those two things coming together can produce significant advances. In the case of the self-driving cars, which I feel very passionately about, if you just think of the safety of driving, how many people we have dying, every day on streets in the U.S. here and around the world, or 1 million people a year who die in auto fatalities around the world. It's really tragic, and I know that our press sort of draws us to other pockets of tragedy, be it violence or airplane crashes and so forth, but we have the equivalent of an airplane crashing every business day in this country alone, and worldwide. It's thousands of people die every day in auto accidents. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to apply technology, apply information technology to really make the world significantly better.
So Sergey, we sourced questions from around the world on Twitter, so I want to take an audience question, which is from @NerdWorldOrder from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the question is, what is a recent challenge that Google/Alphabet had as a growing company, and how was it solved?
What is a recent challenge? Okay, we have many recent challenges. The trick is to find one that we've solved. That's a much narrower field. I think, I guess I could put several things under this rubric, but when it comes to both our self-driving cars, some of our robotics efforts, and so forth, these things are fundamentally challenging because they interact with the real world, and the real world is a very imperfect world. There are many sensors always produce somewhat imperfect information. It's complex and so forth. And the truth is that the recent advances in machine learning have enabled us to really overcome some of the challenges of having accurate perception, having navigation, across a range of projects. Now, you guys might be more familiar with things like Google Photos or the speech recognition that we do, when you talk to your phone. But these things are getting dramatically better because of deep neural nets. And that's, the application of that to a whole range of technologies has allowed us to overcome what seemed like incredible challenges.
So I want to switch gears a bit and get your advice, get your perspective on things globally. So you were born in Moscow, what was then the Soviet Union. You immigrated here when you were quite young. So tell us what that experience was like, and more specifically now, what are your views on the role of immigration and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's definitely, my life experience started in a very different place. I've been very lucky. I've continually experienced expanding opportunity where, was very, very little opportunity in Moscow. You know, I lived with my family in a little 400 square foot apartment. You know, you'd walk up 5 flights of stairs. It was this little place. But it was, you know, it was home, and then to make it to this great big land, you know, to come without anything, without the language, and so forth was definitely hard. But
How old were you?
I was 6.
6.
And it was challenging, but it definitely, you know, gave me a lot of freedom to explore. I should give some credit to, I went to this Montessori school, actually, for elementary school, and I came to the US first. And I think that's sort of part of this sense of, oh, well, you know, I can do things at, you know, my own pace and with my own interests. Not all of you might be familiar with the Montessori method, but that's the idea that, you know, kids can take control of their sort of schedule and pursue the projects, you know, as they wish. And I think that played an important role in my life. And then, you know, having the opportunity to come out here to Stanford to study, to meet such a wealth of diverse people for both academia and industry out here. It was, you know, I've always had this great fortune of expanding opportunity and, you know, freedom to explore. And I so wish more people around the world had that. And I think, you know, people end up stuck in a variety of places. Sometimes, you know, there's just political restriction on their movement. Some people are very economically constrained. I mean, there's just, you know, they might have a certain set of basics, but they don't, you know, in their situation, given the dynamics of the economy, really have the mobility to try something different, to expand. And I wish everybody could have, you know, what I think all of you are partaking, probably at, you know, great expense to yourself. You know, you're foregoing other comforts and things, but just to be able to make your own decisions, to have your dream, to pave your own way. I wish that for all people.
So related to that, we talk a lot about special advantages companies have when they start here in Silicon Valley. What do you think advantages are for companies who actually start outside of Silicon Valley?
I think Silicon Valley is not the easiest place to actually start something. I know that sort of maybe contradicts what everybody has been saying. But, and it a little bit fluctuates, but during the boom cycles, kind of the, you know, the expectations around the costs, you know, the real estate, the salaries, the, you know, the expectations people and employees have and so forth, it makes it hard to make, you know, some kind of scrappy initial business that's then self-sustaining. And in other parts of the world, you might have an easier time with that. I think Silicon Valley is, however, good at sort of scaling that opportunity to providing more capital, allowing more risk. And I think the world today, and one of the challenges of globalization is that there, in any particular category, there are relatively few victors. You know, there's sort of, you know, being the number 5 or number 6 company in some category is just not really viable, and that doesn't give a lot of space for people to explore and develop. You know, Silicon Valley, I think at some level tends to invest more to push the bounds there. But I do think it would be great for our economies to sustain a greater diversity of companies and to allow more companies to be successful, even as we globalize, you know, within sectors. I think that would be healthier, but I think it's challenging.
Well, it's helpful. It's optimistic to hear. You think there's, in some ways, it's easier to start outside.
I think the initial start, certainly during the Silicon Valley boom cycle, is probably easier outside. But people do end up, starting something and then migrating here often.
Sure. So audience question from @PaoloZap from Italy. So what innovation or technology or product do you think will have the biggest influence on our life in the coming years?
I guess it's going to sound like I just keep giving the same answer. But really, the machine learning sort of, when I was in grad school here, it was like a footnote in the course material. I mean, like, yeah, people tried neural nets, didn't really work. Go do your real computer science. And it actually is very, very different now. Probably over the past 5 years especially, like this technology just at the scale that it happens to have reached, a few techniques that have been developed and so forth. It's amazing to see small number of basic ideas touching product after product after product after area after area after area. I mean, in a way like electricity 100 years ago, which electrified lighting and factories and transportation briefly and now again. But it's touching so many things.
You seem pretty excited about artificial intelligence as well. Is there a particular thing you're looking at within that realm?
I think AI is a little bit of a loaded term and people get excited about it. But fundamentally, there's a whole class of mathematical techniques, and now you guys will all get bored if I discuss them at length. But the way that these neural networks train, and then you're able to use them for inference and so forth, and they just can be applied to so many different things. They can not only be used for image recognition, but they can be used to generate images. And not just speech recognition, but to produce songs. You might have seen we produced this, we had the network produce the song and so forth. You all probably saw sort of the work on the game of Go, which is something actually I spent a lot of time playing at Stanford. It almost prevented Google from happening. But it's really very broadly applicable, and it requires a certain amount of tailoring. I mean, it's not trivial. I've been playing myself and tinkering, doing a little bit of coding. But nonetheless, these pieces of technology, they are readily transportable across many, many different areas of what you want to accomplish. So it's quite extraordinary.
So if you were starting a company from scratch today in 2016, what would it be? What would be working on? And it can't be machine learning only.
I mean, I think there are several really exciting areas. I think for any of them, I would have to go back to school, honestly. I'd probably start here and going to classes. But I think in addition to machine learning, there's nanotechnology. I think the notion that the materials that we use could just be dramatically better. And I think that's very powerful. I was just actually reading an article about taking the CO2 out of power plants and turning it into carbon nanotubes, believe it or not, which are sort of among the strongest of known materials. And I mean, this is all, look, these are research articles, so they may never pan out or it may take decades. But I think it's incredible what people are looking at in nanotechnology. And of course, in biotech, we're increasingly understanding what's actually going on and designing therapies and so forth from a sort of well-reasoned computational basis, and that's pretty new.
Can you tell us what book you're reading right now, or a book that you would recommend to the audience?
So I recently read a book by actually a Stanford professor, Leonard Susskind, and it was his quantum mechanics book. I think it's like Quantum Mechanics, the Theoretical Minimum, which...
Sounds like a short read.
I'll confess. It actually is a relatively brief book, and it's meant to be sort of bridge, kind of, if you're like not quite a physicist, but you're kind of, interested enough as a hobbyist. I mean, but I'll confess, it definitely took me a long time to get through, but it's not too much math if you're compared to like proper physics textbooks.
Is there a book that you recommend?
No, I actually did like that one. He also has a classical mechanics, the theoretical minima, which is the prequel.
Get the whole series.
The prequel, but I actually thought the quantum one was the better of the two, to be perfectly honest.
So Sergey, what is next on your travel bucket list?
My travel bucket list. I've had the good fortune to travel a lot. I will mention to you. I'll give you actually a really good recommendation, and it's on my travel bucket list because. So first, the past strokes. Last March, just a few months ago, I was in Indonesia, which first of all is we have Indonesians on this. Woohoo! Well, it's first of all a stunningly beautiful country, but it also happened to be the site of the latest solar eclipse, the latest total solar eclipse. Which, if you've never actually seen one, it's like there's no way I can communicate to you what it is like without you seeing one. I mean, there's just no television can show it. Has anybody here seen a total solar eclipse, not partial, but the real deal? Here we go. Okay, did you guys think it was pretty spectacular? Yeah. All right. Well, there were a few voices, but they all said yes. So next year, on my birthday, in fact, so I consider this sort of a astronomical gift. There's one that spans almost the entire United States. So you don't actually have to go travel far and wide. And it cuts from like Oregon to Georgia or something like that. So I would recommend that one.
All right. So who have been your main influences or who's had a huge impact on your life? That's a big wide open question. I mean, certainly I've been quite influenced by my teachers, both through my various schools and here in grad school. I want to give kudos to the Yahoo guys, and especially Dave Filo, who, we kind of, in the early days when we had the whole prototype, we were shopping it around, and he kind of said, like, look, why don't you guys just go out and build this thing? And I took his advice to heart. And that worked out very well, so kudos to Dave. And on top of that, I will secondly tell you, and I remember I met with him a couple times back then, and he drove me around in his, like, falling apart 20-year-old car with, like, it didn't even have a working, like, fuel gauge. So we almost ran out of gas. And this was at a time where Yahoo was already, like, a quite valuable company. It wasn't that, he was, at least certainly on paper, very wealthy. And Dave never really was affected at all by money, pretty much. I mean, he always had whatever normal house. I would say maybe abnormal car, and that like few people of like normal income would tolerate that. But I think it was great to see how he didn't let his wealth or notoriety affect him much. Amazing. So we're almost out of time, and I want to close by asking you to do a little bit of free word association, fill in the blank with me. So I'm just going to read you a few prompts and ask you to fill in the blank.
Okay, this is going to be stressful.
Just the first thing that comes to mind. So
it could be very inappropriate. All right. I'm going to have to spend a little time filtering it. All right.
So the next big company will likely come from?
Well, somehow Albania came to mind, to be honest. But I don't really think that. I just... That's the flaw with the free word
I can give you a second try on that one, Ben.
Okay, where will it come from? The next big company?
This is a challenge to Albanian entrepreneurs. Let's do it.
I kind of feel that if I have to name a country and I want the odds to be with me, then it would have to be China. Well, just by population.
The best advice I could give an entrepreneur would be?
I would say enjoy the dream.
Something I'm grateful for right now is?
I'm grateful to be here at Stanford.
My thoughts on failure are?
Failure doesn't matter. It's nor does success. I mean, it's really the privilege to pursue your dream that matters.
And last one. Last one for everyone in the room here. 3 words I would use to describe the entrepreneur's journey are?
3? It's like homework. Okay, I would say, let me go with 2. Challenging and fulfilling.
Thank you all for joining us, and thank
Thank
you,
you.
Sergey Brin.